Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this unique unit deep dive, we're going to look at the Iron Pagoda. Historically, these were heavily armored Jurchen shock cavalry covered in lamellar armor, which would fall within the umbrella of a cataphract, though as we'll see, AW2 handles them a bit differently than it does the Byzantine's version of that motif, with a bit different specialties. The Iron Pagoda's unique ability is periodically blocking attacks, much like a Shravamsha rider against arrows, but this time for melee units. And we'll look at how that helps out the unit, as well as when Jurchens might prefer Iron Pagodas over their other stable options. To start with that basic comparison, here we have them beside light cavalry and steppe lancers in Castle Age, remembering Jurchens have a civ bonus for 20% faster attacking mounted units. Simply from their cost, we can infer a lot about their role, with the same 80 food as a light cavalry, but an extra 55 gold added on top, implying they're your real pop efficiency muscle unit. Their stats reflect that, with significantly higher HP, more attack, and more melee and pierce armor than the other two here, though with a trade-off of a bit slower attack rate and speed. All that armor is pretty heavy after all. Their pierce armor and HP right away suggests a bit of an extra anti-archer roll, but its special effect of blocking the odd melee attack means they'll do even better in melee than we would guess from their stats alone. Remember, Jurchens don't have knights, but it's pretty clear this is intended to fill a very similar generalist role. In fact, side by side with a knight, they have the same 135 total resource cost, swapping 20 food for gold, with the biggest distinction being Iron Pagodas are created at castles, so you lose the early Castle Age power spike transition of a knight, but once you have a castle, their creation time is about half as long, helping you catch up. Checking out their stats, the two line up in many ways, with the Iron Pagoda looking slightly better if anything, with 15 more HP, plus 2 attack, albeit with a slower attack rate, then swapping 1 melee for 1 pierce armor, and then even moving a tiny bit faster than knights. Speed-wise, they actually match a cavalry archer, being a step ahead of the more traditional heavy cavalry class of unit, though the differences here are all relatively small. In terms of upgrades, there's no unique tech to worry about or anything fancy, and just the regular bloodlines, husbandry, and melee cavalry upgrades apply. So far, it really looks like just a slightly better knight made from the castle, but now let's take a closer look at their special ability, blocking some of your opponent's melee attacks. Pretty simply, when it's fully charged, the first incoming melee attack is completely absorbed by a shield, within a 40-second window before that ability comes back, or 30 seconds for the elite version. Note this doesn't help against melee projectiles, like from the throwing axeman even at zero range, so it's maybe more correct to say it blocks non-projectiles, rather than it blocks melee attacks. Immediately, this raises some obvious questions though, around enemy charge and splash damage attacks. Using a fully upgraded Elite Urumi Swordsman as an example, this unit has a charge attack that deals extra damage to its target within a splash effect as well, and we notice two things. First, the Iron Pagoda's shield does block the main hit, but the Urumi doesn't waste his charge, and he just uses it again on the next hit as well, so the Urumi's charge attack is just delayed by a couple of seconds, and not really absorbed. The other thing we notice here is the splash damage removes the melee shield of any Iron Pagodas adjacent to it, so any sort of splash damage that doesn't involve projectiles essentially uses up the Iron Pagoda's ability. That excludes things like Bombard Cannon and Mangonel splash damage since they have projectiles, but includes things like Flaming Camels and Demo Ships. On first seeing the unit, I personally had assumed focus charge attacks, like from the Coustier, would lose their charge against the Pagoda's shield, but those and Urumi Swordsman end up being about as effective as usual, with a slight delay on their main hits, and splash damage units like Cataphracts are extra good at dealing with the shields because of their area attack. In other cases, like Demo Ships, the shield blocking incoming splash damage is very useful, so I don't mean to sound like it's always underwhelming. So to recap, we have what you could consider a Knight Plus unit we can make from the castle that's harder to rush with, but long term seems to be a bit better on paper for a lower gold cost, and can block the odd melee attack. But now let's see how it actually performs in a few tests, as that melee blocking aspect is kind of hard to predict. To start with some of the Jurchen's other cavalry options as a benchmark, against both Jurchen Steppe Lancers and Light Cavalry, if we balance resources, the Iron Pagoda comes out ahead. Obviously, it would be pop efficient, but these are 20% faster attacking Steppe Lancers and Light Cavalry, and it's nice to see it's still cost efficient. In fact, the advantage is similar to their edge over generic knights, which end with the Iron Pagodas having a similar third of their HP left over. It's not complete domination, but there's definitely some compensation for the difficulty in massing them from castles. That said, things narrow considerably if we use something more top tier, like Teuton Knights instead, which take 2 more Iron Pagoda hits thanks to +1 melee armor. So we can say Iron Pagodas are a step ahead of even top tier knights in the mid game when it comes to melee fights. And another matchup I want to look at was against the Cuirassier due to the dueling charge abilities. With balanced resources, the two units are basically evenly matched, so maybe it's a good thing the Cuirassier's ability isn't fully absorbed by the Iron Pagoda shield, or they get absolutely crushed given how weak their non-charge attack is. Another interesting benchmark, I think, is the Boyar, which feels like a similar extra melee focused version of the Knight, and in this case has a slight edge over the Iron Pagoda, but nothing dramatic. So far, this is a good result, though we probably expected it to be good in melee, handling most cavalry and generic infantry without a lot of problem. But it would be nice to find a common situation outside demo shifts where its ability could really shine. Conceptually, what we need is a unit that hits very hard but attacks slowly, as then blocking one of those attacks would be especially meaningful. One unit that falls perfectly into that category is of course the pikeman. Players have really noticed how slowly pikemen attack now that the animation is properly synced up, and side by side against a knight, notice the pikeman only gets 2 proper attacks through against an Iron Pagoda, while it has 4 land on a knight. The Iron Pagoda's extra attack is helping here as well, and altogether you can see it ends up one-on-one with way more HP left over. At the same time, I don't want to oversell this, as with balanced resources, Iron Pagodas still get destroyed by pikemen, and the effect isn't strong enough to completely reverse that dynamic. On the other hand, if we keep things to balanced numbers of units, the Iron Pagodas here actually do alright, with over 2/3 of their HP left. Even a Teuton Knight, as one of the best knights in Castle Age, ends with around half, so its losses value-wise are about 50% higher than the Iron Pagodas. This is a good example where delaying just that first attack has a big impact when compounded with their already slightly better stats. I wouldn't go as far as say they hold it better against all the Knights' counters though, and actually find they do about the same as Teuton Knights against Saracen Camels, which makes some sense, as Camels attack 50% faster than spear units, so losing out on one attack is just not as meaningful as it was against Pikes. Of course, they actually have another major advantage over Jurchen's other cavalry units as well, which is how good they are against arrows. Remember, they have more pierce armor than not just the Step Lancer and Light Cavalry, but even one more pierce armor than a Knight, along with the highest HP of the units here. They have about 70% more durability against crossbows and town centers than a Knight, and over 3 times the durability of Step Lancers. The differences are a bit less dramatic against cavalry archers and elite skirmishers, but Iron Pagodas consistently have a noticeable edge, which more than offsets their individually higher cost. Their high attack even means they're better than knights against buildings, and in Castle Age it just comes across as an all-around solid cavalry unique unit. Now though, let's switch our focus to the Imperial Age, where the competition steps up from knights to cavalier and paladins. First off, the elite upgrade is 950 food and 550 gold, and compared to the 1600 food and 1050 gold of cavalier and paladin upgrades together, it's actually not that bad. The trade-off is their stats aren't helped out quite as much, maxing out at 160 HP and only gaining +1 attack and +1 melee armor. The paladin appears to have them matched or beat in the important categories, with 20 more HP and even 1 more attack. While the elite Iron Pagoda upgrade might seem underwhelming, they still have a clear edge over Cavalier, and remember the melee shield ability is still a bit of a wild card, with that recharging 10 seconds faster once they're elite. To get a sense of their stats in context, against generic Chinese Cavaliers with equal numbers, they're definitely a step up, and end up pretty evenly matched against some of the best Cavaliers, such as the Malians with Frimba in yellow as an example. From that, it shouldn't be too surprising they're really not a match for Paladins, at least if we balance numbers and total resources. Paladins are 20 more gold each, so there's still a bit of a value argument for elite Iron Pagodas, but we're getting a sense they land a bit lower on the totem pole than they did in Castle Age. Again, probably the matchup their unique ability helps the most is against Halberdiers, at least with roughly balanced numbers, and is the main situation they'll outperform Paladins in a vacuum. With 15 units all around, the elite Iron Pagodas have 69% of their HP left over against Halberdiers, whereas generic Paladins have a bit less at 62%. A top tier Paladin would probably do better, but for a lower gold and upgrade cost, Iron Pagodas are still very solid. The fun exception is against Slav Halberdiers with their splash damage on each hit, which is enough to use up the Iron Pagoda's shield. In this case, where Paladins have only a slight dip in performance from 62 to 54% HP left over, Iron Pagodas tank from 69 to 21. It reveals how much that shield working as intended pitches in against spearline units, and is enough to suggest starting fights with pagodas and then pulling them back quickly to recharge their shields probably gives a lot of value if you can make that work. Though admittedly pulling them back for 30 seconds after a couple of hits over and over is a little tedious and maybe impractical. On the other hand, their ability makes pagodas very good at cleaning up small numbers of otherwise dangerous units, taking little to no damage. I should also note their advantage over ranged units still exists compared to Jurchen's other cavalry options in Imperial Age, taking over double the Arbalester shots of either the Hussar or Elite Steppe Lancer. In fact, they're only slightly beaten by the Paladin in arrows taken, and are actually a little faster moving, so Iron Pagodas are great at raiding, and combine tankiness with mobility against archers and cavalry archers for Jurchens. Overall, that leaves us with a decent but not overpowered unit. There are some downsides with having essentially your knight line at the castle, though if you can mass them across the board, they're a bit of a step up from knights against both melee, including pikemen, and ranged units in the mid-game. In Imperial Age, while they might not fully keep up with paladins, you're saving a ton of gold and upgrade costs, while it fills a similar role for Jurchens, who otherwise lack the knight line entirely. Backing them up with Jurchen's fully upgraded skirmishers, cavalry archers, grenadiers, or good siege are all pretty natural, and the 20 less gold per Iron Pagoda than Paladin means those double gold unit combos are a bit easier to balance than if Jurchens had Paladin. Jurchens in team games actually have a nice spike in the late game, and it's always hard to attribute that type of thing to one individual unit, but Elite Iron Pagodas may at least be a small factor. That'll do it for this one though. Big thanks to James, Samantha, Jared2142, Niels, Steven, Shawarma Rider, Woodruff, and everyone else on Patreon for their incredible support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.